The dim glow of the hollow's lanterns spilled out onto Pearl Street, casting long shadows over the bustling Denver evening. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of aged whiskey and faint cigar smoke jazz notes weaving through the murmurs of conversation like a gentle undercurrent. It was Friday night, and Haley Green had sought refuge here not for company, but for the simple act of disappearing into the crowd. At 28, she was a content production supervisor at Viora Publishing, a role that once fueled her passion for storytelling. Now it was just a way to fill the hours a distraction from the gaping wound left by Chase. She perched on a stool at the bar, her fingers tracing the rim of a half-empty mojito. The ice had melted long ago, diluting the drink into something as bland as her evenings lately. Haley had come with a few colleagues, their laughter a distant hum she barely registered. She wasn't here to forget entirely, not yet, but the betrayal still burned Chase. Her boyfriend of 3 years caught with Samantha, her supposed best friend on the very sofa they'd picked out together in a thrift shop. The image replayed in her mind like a bad film loop, each frame sharper than the last. She sipped her drink, eyes fixed on the polished wood of the bar when the door swung open with a chime. Laughter followed familiar cutting. Haley's head snapped up. There, arm in arm, stood Chase and Samantha, their faces flushed from the cold outside. Chase's easy grin faltered for a split second when he spotted her, but it quickly reformed into something smug. Samantha, with her perfectly styled hair and that infuriatingly innocent smile, clung to him like a trophy. "Haley, what a coincidence," Chase said, sauntering over with Samantha in tow. His voice carried that casual arrogance she'd once mistaken for charm. He leaned against the bar close enough that Haley could smell his cologne, the same one she'd bought him last Christmas. Samantha shifted uncomfortably but managed a wave. "Hey, Hale. Long time no see?" Haley's grip tightened on her glass. "Yeah. Funny how that works when you sleep with my boyfriend." The words hung in the air, drawing a few curious glances from nearby patrons. Chase chuckled, rubbing the back of his neck. "Come on, don't be dramatic. It's been months. We're all adults here." "Adults?" Haley's voice cracked, but she steadied it. "You cheated on me with my best friend, on your birthday no less, and now you're parading her around like nothing happened." Samantha looked away, fiddling with her necklace. Chase shrugged his eyes cold. "Not my fault if you couldn't keep things exciting. Samantha gets me. She doesn't cling." The jab landed like a punch. Haley felt the heat rise in her cheeks, the sting of humiliation spreading. She wanted to scream to throw her drink, but instead her gaze darted across the bar seeking an escape. That's when she saw him, a man standing alone in the corner nursing a glass of scotch. He was tall with broad shoulders, under a black shirt, his dark hair slightly tousled, as if he'd run a hand through it in thought. His eyes met hers, not with pity, but with a quiet understanding, like he'd seen storms like this before. Something snapped in Haley. She slid off her stool, heart pounding, and walked straight toward him. The stranger raised an eyebrow, but didn't pull away as she reached him and took his hand. It was warm, steady, unlike everything else in her life. She turned back to Chase, who watched with a smirk. "So? This is the guy you left me for?" he asked, nodding toward the stranger. Haley met his gaze, her voice steady for the first time that night. "No, this is the guy who'll—" Before Chase could respond, she pulled the stranger down and kissed him. It wasn't gentle or passionate, it was defiant, a reclaiming of her shattered pride. His lips were soft, tasting faintly of scotch, and for a moment the world blurred. He didn't resist. Instead, his hand lightly touched her waist, steadying her. When she broke away, the bar seemed quiet, her eyes wide around them. Chase stood, frozen, his smirk gone, replaced by a flicker of shock. Samantha tugged at his arm, whispering something urgent. Haley didn't wait for a reaction. She released the stranger's hand, offered him a quick, apologetic glance, and walked out into the cold night. The door swung shut behind her, the jazz fading as she hailed a cab. She didn't look back, didn't regret it. For the first time in months, she felt a spark of control. Little did she know the man she'd just kissed, Elliot Hayes, would walk into her office in 48 hours as her new boss. The Monday morning sun filtered through the blinds of Viora Publishing's high-rise in downtown Denver, casting striped shadows across the lobby. Haley Green stepped off the elevator onto the 17th floor, her heels clicking against the polished tile. She adjusted her blazer, smoothing out invisible wrinkles, a habit born from the need to appear composed even when her world felt like it was fracturing. At 28, she'd built a solid role as content production supervisor, overseeing manuscripts and digital campaigns. But since Chase's betrayal, the office had become a battlefield of avoidance, fewer coffee chats, no more sharing her poetry drafts, just head-down focus to drown out the echoes of that sofa, that laugh, that final goodbye. She nodded to a few colleagues in the break room, grabbing a black coffee before heading to her desk. Emails piled up, deadlines, revisions, the usual grind. But one stood out, a company-wide memo about the recent merger with a major Boston media conglomerate. Exciting changes ahead, it read, with a vague mention of a new interim CEO to oversee creative restructuring. Whispers had circulated for weeks. The new boss was young, ruthless, fresh from turning around failing divisions on the East Coast. Haley skimmed it, uninterested. As long as it didn't disrupt her routine, she didn't care. The all-hands meeting was called for 10 o'clock in the main conference room. Haley arrived early, sliding into a seat near the back, notebook in hand. The room filled quickly, the air buzzing with speculation. "Heard he's a shark," someone murmured. "Fired half a team in his last gig." Haley doodled absent-mindedly, her mind drifting back to the weekend, the bar, the kiss, the stranger's steady gaze. It had been a reckless moment, but it lingered, a rare. A man entered, flanked by two executives from the merger team. He was tall, his presence commanding without effort, dressed in a tailored gray suit that spoke of quiet power. Dark hair, sharp jawline, eyes that scanned the room with calculated precision. Haley's pen froze mid-stroke. It was him, the man from the hollow, the one she'd kissed in a fit of defiance. Her heart slammed against her ribs, the room tilting slightly as memories flooded back, the taste of scotch, the warmth of his hand on her waist. He stepped to the front, adjusting the microphone with a nod. "Good morning. I'm Elliot Hayes, your interim CEO for the creative division during this transition." His voice was smooth, authoritative, carrying the faint clip of a New England upbringing. He outlined the merger's goals, streamlining content, boosting innovation, cutting inefficiencies with the efficiency of someone who delivered similar speeches before. His gaze swept the room, pausing briefly on Haley. A flicker. Recognition? She couldn't tell. He continued without missing a beat, wrapping up with, "I look forward to working with you all." Questions? A few hands rose, mundane inquiries about timelines and roles. Haley stayed silent, her mind racing. How was this possible? The stranger from the bar, now her boss. She studied him, no sign of discomfort, no lingering glance. If he remembered, he hid it masterfully. The meeting adjourned, and employees filed out, murmuring about the new regime. Haley gathered her things, slowly hoping to slip away unnoticed. A week passed in a blur of tension. Elliot's presence loomed, memos demanding fresh ideas, audits of ongoing projects. Haley buried herself in work, avoiding the executive floor. Then an email pinged, "Meeting request Project Aurora. 3 p.m. my office. E. Hayes." Her stomach. Aurora was a stalled initiative for interactive storytelling apps, something she'd pitched months ago but never gained traction. At 3, she knocked on his door, entering a sleek space with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Rockies. Elliot sat behind a minimalist desk reviewing documents. "Ms. Green, take a seat." His tone was professional, no hint of familiarity. She complied, clutching her notebook like a shield. "I've reviewed your file," he said, leaning back. "Your work on the last digital series was solid, but underutilized. I want you on Aurora leading content development." Haley blinked. "Me? Why?" He met her eyes directly for the first time since the bar. "Because I read When the Fire Fell Silent, the manuscript you attached by mistake in a report last year. It's raw compelling. You have fire, Haley. We need that to revive this company." The words hung between them. He'd read her unpublished work, a deeply personal piece about loss and reinvention written during her darkest days post-chase. She felt exposed, vulnerable. "I didn't know it was out there," she stammered. "But thank you. I'll do my best." He nodded, sliding a folder across. "Good. We start tomorrow." No mention of the kiss, no awkwardness. As she left, Haley felt a strange pull, a connection she couldn't ignore. But she reminded herself he was her boss now. Whatever spark had ignited that night needed to stay buried. The weeks following the meeting blurred into a rhythm of collaboration that Haley hadn't anticipated. Project Aurora demanded late nights and intense brainstorming sessions, pulling her deeper into Elliot's orbit. They met daily in his office or the creative lounge, poring over wireframes and content outlines. Elliot's approach was methodical, dissecting her ideas with precision, challenging weak points, but always building on her strengths. "This narrative arc has potential," he'd say, his pen hovering over her notes, "but let's amplify the emotional hook." Haley found herself responding in kind, her creativity reigniting in ways it hadn't since before Chase. Their synergy was undeniable. Ideas flowed like a current, each session ending with tangible progress. Yet the kiss lingered unspoken, a ghost in the room. Haley replayed it in quiet moments, the warmth, the defiance, but Elliot never alluded to it. His demeanor remained professional, his focus laser-sharp on the work. She began to question if it had meant anything to him at all, or if she was just projecting her loneliness onto a fleeting encounter. To cope, she threw herself into the project, arriving early with fresh concepts and staying late to refine them. Elliot noticed, often lingering after others left, but their conversations stayed surface-level deadlines, user engagement metrics, market trends. Subtle gestures began to chip away at her resolve. One afternoon, during a review, Elliot quoted a line from her unpublished manuscript verbatim. "The fire didn't die. It just waited for kindling." Haley stared, her cheeks warming. "How do you remember that?" she asked. He shrugged, eyes on the screen. "It stuck with me. Use that intensity here in the app's storytelling modules." Another time, when she called in sick to accompany her mother to a doctor's appointment, an email arrived mid-morning. "Take the time you need. The pitch can wait. E? No demands, no follow-ups, simple concern." The turning point came during a late session in the lounge, the city lights twinkling beyond the windows. Haley rubbed her eyes, exhaustion setting in after hours of revisions. Elliot noticed, sliding his headphones across the table without a word. She hesitated, then put them on. Rachmaninoff's Prelude in C-sharp minor filled her ears, melancholic stirring. When the piece ended, she removed them. Why? Elliot leaned back, his expression softening for the first time. I listened to it after my mother passed. In Boston winters, it reminded me pain doesn't erase everything, it reshapes it. Haley swallowed, touched by the vulnerability. Thank you, she said, her voice barely audible. He nodded, returning to the screen as if nothing profound had occurred. Their dynamic shifted subtly after that, less guarded, more intuitive. But drama arrived uninvited with Amanda Crowley. The merger team announced her as the new marketing director flown in from the Boston headquarters. Amanda strode into her first meeting like she owned the floor-sharp bob haircut designer suit, a confidence that bordered on predatory. Haley recognized the type, immediately ambitious, unflinching. What she didn't expect was the familiarity between Amanda and Elliot. During the presentation, Amanda placed a hand on his arm mid-sentence, laughing at an inside joke about that disastrous launch in 18. Elliot smiled politely, but the gesture lingered. As weeks progressed, Amanda inserted herself into Aurora's workflow. This concept is too niche, she'd critique during reviews, her eyes flicking to Haley with subtle dismissal. We need broader appeal. Think viral, not literary. Haley defended her ideas, but Amanda's influence grew, reshaping timelines and budgets. Worse, she clung to Elliot lunches together, shared rides to off-sites, whispers in hallways. Haley caught snippets, old stories from their time in Boston, hints of a past relationship. Jealousy coiled in her chest, unbidden and unwelcome. Was this why Elliot never mentioned the kiss? Was Amanda the reason? The breaking point came one afternoon. Haley approached the conference room for a file, pausing at the cracked door. Inside, Amanda's voice carried, "Your new assistant's got some spark, but she's a bit eager, don't you think, trying too hard to impress?" Elliot's reply was measured. She's not an assistant, she's leading content, and she has real value, unlike relationships built on superficial charm. Silence followed, then, the scrape of a chair. Haley backed away, heart racing. He had defended her, but the words stung Amanda's jab, Elliot's indirect admission. Confusion swirled. Was he protecting her work or something more? As she returned to her desk, Haley wondered if the electric pull between them was real or just another illusion she'd built to fill the void. Amanda's influence seeped into every corner of the project like ink on paper, blurring lines Haley had fought to define. She rescheduled meetings without notice, demanded rewrites that diluted Haley's vision, and always positioned herself next to Elliot, her laughter a calculated echo in the room. Haley felt the shift, a subtle erosion of her role, each critique chipping away at her confidence. This feels too introspective, Amanda would say, her eyes flicking dismissively over Haley's drafts. We need punch, not poetry. Elliot often countered, his voice steady. Introspection is what sets us apart. But the tension mounted, and Haley began withdrawing her responses curt, her ideas guarded. She avoided eye contact during sessions, focusing on her screen or notes. Elliot noticed his brows furrowing in quiet concern, but he said nothing at first. The unspoken weight of the bar incident hung heavier, now compounded by Amanda's presence. Haley wondered if Elliot regretted it, if she was just a momentary distraction in his structured world. One afternoon, as the team dispersed after a grueling review, Elliot lingered. "Haley, a word!" His tone was neutral, but his eyes held a question. She followed him to "You've been distant. If it's about the project..." "It's not just the project," Haley interrupted, her voice sharper than intended. She paced a step, then stopped facing him. Amanda's here throwing her weight around and you let her, but that's not it. We work together every day and you act like that night at the bar never happened. Like I didn't kiss you in front of everyone to spite my ex. Was it nothing to you? Just some random woman's bad decision?" Elliot's expression tightened, a flicker of surprise crossing his features. He straightened, reaching into his jacket pocket. "It wasn't nothing." He pulled out a folded slip of paper worn at the edges and placed it on the desk between them. Haley unfolded it slowly, a receipt from the Hollow dated that Friday night, scrawled on the back in neat handwriting, "To the stranger who made her laugh again." She stared, her breath catching. "You kept this?" Elliot nodded, his gaze steady. "Wrote that because your eyes that night, they weren't just angry. They were alive, fighting back. I grew up in a world where people hide behind facades, Boston high society expectations from my father's empire. I learned early to compartmentalize to keep emotions at arm's length, but you walked up and shattered that in seconds." Haley set the receipt down, her fingers trembling slightly. "Why didn't you say anything sooner?" "Because I'm your boss now, and because Amanda?" He sighed, running a hand through his hair. "She was my fiancée years ago. We met in college, but when my mother died, cancer quick and brutal, she couldn't handle it. I refused to take over my father's company, chose publishing instead. Amanda left, said I was throwing away our future. Now she's back for the merger, stirring things up. But I'm not letting her dictate this." The vulnerability in his voice cracked something in Haley. She stepped closer, her defenses crumbling. "Chase, he didn't just cheat. He made me feel invisible, like I was never enough. Samantha was my friend, or so I thought. After that, I shut down. Stopped writing, stopped trusting. That kiss, it was me trying to feel something, anything." Elliot's eyes softened, a rare warmth breaking through his composure. "You're more than enough, Haley. You've brought life back to this project to me. I didn't push because I didn't want to complicate things. But if we're being honest, I've thought about that night every day." The air between them thickened, charged with unspoken possibility. Haley searched his face, finding sincerity in the lines around his eyes. "What now?" she whispered. Elliot took her hand gently, his touch tentative. "We give this a chance. No games, no hiding. But only if you want to." She nodded, a small smile forming. "I do." He released her hand, stepping back with a nod. "Then let's finish Aurora first. The rest, we'll figure out." Haley left his office, the receipt tucked in her pocket like a talisman. That evening, alone in her apartment, she opened her laptop. The cursor blinked on a blank page, but for the first time in years, words flowed. Not for work, but for herself, a new chapter in her unfinished novel. As sentences formed, she felt the ice around her heart begin to thaw, one keystroke at a time. Months turned into a transformative blur at Viora Publishing. Haley's contributions to Aurora propelled the project to success, earning accolades for its innovative blend of interactive narratives and emotional depth. Her promotion to head of the creative team came swiftly, a testament to her revived passion. Colleagues whispered about her as the new icon, resilient visionary, the one who'd breathed life back into stagnant campaigns. Haley embraced it, her days filled with leading brainstorming sessions and mentoring juniors, her nights spilling over with ideas that no longer felt confined by old wounds. Elliot, however, chose a different path. He declined the permanent CEO role, citing a desire to step away from corporate hierarchies. "I've spent years building walls," he confided to Haley one evening over takeout in her apartment. "Now, I want to create without them." He founded a small independent studio in a converted warehouse on the outskirts of Denver, focusing on niche publishing books, podcasts, and digital series centered on personal healing and storytelling. It wasn't glamorous, lacking the boardrooms and power suits of his past, but it suited him. Haley collaborated often, their professional synergy evolving into something deeper, more intimate. Their relationship unfolded quietly, without grand declarations. It started with shared dinners after work, evolving into weekends, exploring Denver's hidden trails, or quiet evenings where Haley read drafts aloud while Elliot sketched cover concepts. He opened up about his mother's death more fully, the way cancer had stolen her vibrancy, leaving him to navigate grief amid his father's expectations of legacy and success. Haley shared her scars from Chase, the erosion of trust, the fear of vulnerability. They didn't rush. Instead, they built on mutual respect, each day a step toward wholeness. A year after that fateful bar night, Haley's debut novel hit the shelves. To the Stranger at the Bar was a semi-autobiographical tale of betrayal, defiance, and rediscovery, a woman reclaiming her voice through an unexpected connection. She poured her experiences into it, the raw ache of infidelity, the spark of an impulsive kiss, the slow thaw of a guarded heart. Reviews praised its authenticity, calling it a beacon for the brokenhearted. Sales climbed steadily, readers connecting with its unflinching honesty. The launch event was held at a cozy cafe near the Hollow, its walls lined with bookshelves and soft lighting casting a warm glow. Friends, colleagues, and a smattering of local press filled the space, the air buzzing with anticipation. Haley stood at a makeshift podium, her voice steady as she read an excerpt. Elliot watched from the side, pride evident in his quiet smile. When she finished, applause erupted, and she signed copies, chatting with attendees about inspiration and resilience. As the crowd thinned, Elliot approached a small box in his hand. "For you," he said, leading her to a quiet corner table. Inside was a simple silver ring etched with a delicate flame motif. "It's not a proposal, not yet," he clarified, slipping it onto her finger. "But a promise. I'll be here through the fires and the silences. You've shown me how to feel again, Haley, and you've shown me I'm not defined by what broke me. Yes, Elliot, let's keep going." They stepped outside as the sun dipped low, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink. Spring had arrived in Denver blossoms, unfurling on nearby trees. Standing before the cafe, Haley leaned into him, Mom Tim, their hands intertwined. The city hummed around them, cars passing, laughter from distant patios, but in that moment, it felt like theirs alone. She thought back to the bar, to the stranger who'd become her anchor, and realized she'd not only healed, but grown. Elliot had been the catalyst, but the strength was hers. As they walked toward his car, Haley glanced at the ring, its flame catching the fading light. She had found her voice, her fire, and a partner who saw her fully. The future stretched ahead, not perfect, but real, filled with stories yet to be written,